Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Helpful Hacker, and today we are going over the JavaScript Essentials room from TryHackMe. So we're going to jump right in and get started with task number 1, the introduction. So basically what this room is going to go over, like it says up here, some JavaScript Essentials. So if you've never done any sort of coding or any sort of scripting at all, a lot of this is going to be new. And it might not all make sense, but you'll still get a handle on how JavaScript works and how it's integrated with HTML and some different stuff that we can do with it. So it'll still be useful even if you haven't. And it's a good intro anyways, and you should know JavaScript because it's on every single website you've ever used. So you can read through this top part. It's just going to talk a little bit about what we're going to learn. Talk a little bit about JavaScript and HTML and CSS, but basically JavaScript is a scripting language and it is used to make websites interactive, and it can do that in a lot of different ways. We'll talk about some of them. And yeah, so read through that top part, some of the things they want you to have done before you start this. The Linux fundamentals, they want you to know some Linux. Web application basics and how websites work. That's going to go over just, front end, back end, client side, server side, and some basic how HTTP requests work, all that stuff. And if none of that sounds familiar, then you should check those rooms out. I have full walkthroughs of them, so you can find those on my channel. And then the learning objectives. Again, we're going to learn about JS. We're going to learn about how we actually get JavaScript into these HTMLs, how we could abuse dialog functions and what dialog functions are. We're going to learn about bypassing control flow statements. I mean, it's kind of a stretch. We're really going to learn about just control flow statements, if-then statements, and that kind of stuff. And then we're going to look at minified files and obfuscating JavaScript. So start your machine, let that load up, read through everything, mark complete, and with that you are done with task number 1. Now it's on to task number 2, essential concepts. So variables, if you've done coding before, or just even a little bit of scripting, most of this stuff is going to be pretty straightforward, and you can probably just skip on to the next one. If you haven't, again, like I said, a lot of this will be new, but it's okay. It's a good intro. So variables in scripting and coding are basically little containers that hold data, right? And in JavaScript, we have 3 different types of variables. You have the var, let, and const variables. And they are different. So the var is function scoped, which means let's see how to explain this. It exists and is declared inside of a function, okay? And it can be called inside of a function if it's declared in there. And then let and const are blocked scoped. Now, for a lot of people, I'm saying, function scoped and block scoped, and they don't understand that. But it's okay. If you don't know a lot about coding, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just know that let and const, because they're block scoped, they're going to be confined to a block, and var is going to be confined to a function. And even if you don't totally know what that means, just remember that. And in the future, trust me, you'll get it. And if you've done a lot of coding, then this should make sense. So the var function, or the var variable, it's not used a whole lot anymore, and it's recommended that you don't use it unless you want this specific function scoped functionality. Like if you need something that does this specifically, then go ahead and use it. But for the most part, you should probably stick to let and const. And that is because this gives you better control over variable visibility within specific code blocks. So generally speaking, kind of best practice, stick to this unless you know for a fact that you happen to need a var variable. So now you're wondering, okay, if we have a function scoped and a block scoped, why are there 3 different ones. Why don't we just have 2? And the reason why we don't have 2 is because const, as best practice, is basically reserved for things that are going to remain constant, things that you're not going to change. So if you have a variable, a little container, and you want to put a piece of information in it, and that piece of information is never going to change, then you would use const. Whereas if it's something that you may want to change or that you know you're going to change, you're going to use let. Okay, so those are variables. So far we've talked about these 3 different types of containers. Now we got to talk about the information that actually goes inside of them. So inside these containers, the 3 big ones they're going to talk about is you can have strings, which are just text. So any sort of text like your name or the city you grew up in, that's text information that you could put inside of a variable. Then there's numbers, pretty straightforward. You could put your age or birth year or whatever. And then there's Boolean. Boolean's a different one. This holds either true or false. So it can only be one of 2 things. A Boolean value is either true or false, and that can be held inside a variable. Then there's these other data types: null, undefined, and object. So those are a bit more advanced. I wouldn't worry too much about them. Once you get into scripting and coding and learn about arrays and stuff, and just objects in general, if you're doing like object-oriented programming, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of other things that go into this, but for now, we're going to worry about the basics. Just worry about strings, numbers, and Boolean values. So now we're going to talk about functions. So a function, you can just think of it, it's a block of code that does a specific thing, and it's easy to reuse. Okay, so it's that simple. So here we have a function. So someone created this function. Why would you create a function? You'd make a function because it's a piece of code that you want to use multiple times. Okay, so the function does the following. It just simply is going to alert, or it's going to print, and we'll learn more about alert boxes here in a minute, but a box will pop up that says username with roll number, and then it's going to add a number right here that we're going to give it. So up here, we're making the function. We named the function print result, and whenever we call that function, we have to give it a number. And that number will appear right here. So it's going to say username with roll number 7 has passed the exam, right? If we put a 7 in here when we call the function. Now, again, if you haven't used this might be a little bit confusing. If you've done scripting, this should be pretty straightforward. So when I say call the function, what I mean is reuse it, right? Because the whole point of a function is we make it and then we can reuse it later really easily, okay? And so here's our function that we made, and then right down here, this is us reusing it, okay? So we're doing print result, which is the name of this function, and then roll numbers, and then we're doing I, and I is equal to 0. So essentially we're putting 0 there. So if I were to run this, it would say alert username with roll number 0 has passed the exam, okay? So that's what a function is. You can read through this. If you're still confused, throw it into ChatGPT and he'll explain each of the little parts. For now, don't worry about this because this is a loop. Just worry about calling the function, this one line, and then these 2 lines, creating the actual function. Now we'll talk about loops. So loops, basically what they allow you to do is they allow you to run over the same block of code as many times as you want, over and over and over again. So for example, if I wanted to write some code that printed the name of every student in, or let's say I wanted to write some code that printed the numbers 0 to 1000, I could put 1,000 lines of code in and just have it print each number individually, but that's 1,000 lines of code. Or what I could do is I could put in 2 lines of code, and my first line will create a loop that will go over my second line 1,000 times, okay? So that's why loops are awesome. They're super useful so you don't have to rewrite stuff over and over again. And there's different types of loops. We're not going to get too into it because that's a little out of the scope of this room. We will talk about a for loop, but there's for, while, and do while loops. And basically they will keep doing something as long as a condition is true. And that's how we determine how long a loop lasts. Okay. So for an example here, we have our for loop and we are letting I equal 0. So I equals 0. And if I is less than 100, we want the loop to keep going. And at the end of the loop, we want to add 1 to I. Okay. So that's what all that means. Again, if you've done coding, this should be pretty straightforward. If not, and this is your first introduction, don't worry. You'll learn more about it as you keep going through TryHackMe. So again, with that, this will be called 100 times because this is going to keep going over and over again until I equals 100. Okay. So that's our for loop. And what it's doing is it's just calling our function 100 times. So that's, again, what makes loops pretty useful. Now the request response cycle, this is just the idea that as a user of a website or something, or when you're using a browser to access a website, you have the client and you have client side and you have server side. So your browser and you on your computer, that's the client side. The server side is going to be where the website is on the internet that you're actually trying to reach, the server that holds all the information for that website. And the request response cycle is just that you will ask for something, the server will respond, and then you'll ask for something else, the server will respond. And it's like a game of ping pong. It goes back and forth. And that's kind of how websites work. You can learn more about it just by clicking here. This will take you to the How Websites Work room from TryHackMe, so you can check that out. Now down to the question, what term allows you to run a code block multiple times as long as it is a condition? I don't really like that question or the way it's phrased, but the answer is loop. Well, loop does allow you to run a code block multiple times as long as it is in a certain condition. Usually as long as there's a true condition, that loop will keep running. So yeah, it's just kind of worded funny. But anyways, answer that question. Make sure you've read through everything. And once you've done that, you've finished task number 2. Now it's on to task number 3, JavaScript overview. So here, it's going to talk a little bit about our first program that we're going to look at. It's going to talk about how JavaScript is an interpreted language, which means the code is executed directly in the browser. It's not compiled beforehand. So here we have some JavaScript that explains, or not explains, but shows some basic key concepts that we need to know. So some of those are like, for example, here we're declaring a variable. Let age equal 25. So we have our variable age, that's what we named it, and the data type that it holds is a number value, and that number is 25, right? And then we have a control flow statement. So here we have an if else statement. So if the age is greater than or equal to 18, it's going to say you are an adult. If it's not greater than or equal to 18, so the alternative is it's going to say you are a minor. And the function right here, this is just basically, here's a function. It's declared with the name greet. So that's the name of the function. And whenever we call that function, we have to provide a name value. And what the function does is it's just going to console.log, which is kind of just JavaScript's way of saying it's going to print this to the page. So it's going to print hello, and then it's going to add the name that we provide. And then down here, we're calling the function, and we do greet Bob. Okay, so we're actually going to get some experience running some JavaScripts here. So to do that, you're going to want to open your browser, or not your browser, your machine, and you're gonna wanna open Chrome. Let me see exactly what it wants me to do first. Yeah, so it's just gonna want us to open Chrome. And then what it's gonna have us do is we're gonna copy this. And then when you're in Chrome, you can either hit F12 or you can right click and go to inspect and then click on this console button right here. And what the console is it basically allows us to run JavaScript in our browser and see different stuff. And you can use it for lots of different things, but here we're just running a basic script, and it's the script that we copied from right down here. So go through all these steps to get where I'm at, pretty straightforward. And all this script is gonna do is it's gonna say let x equal 5, let y equal 10, and then the result is gonna be x plus y, so 5 plus 10. Then it's gonna console.log, or it's gonna print out in the log. The result is, and then it'll give us the result. So we have that all pasted in here. Now if I hit enter, you'll see it says the result is 15. So this is your first JavaScript, okay? And so go through that, and once you've got that done, you can jump down and start answering the questions. But before we do that, one other thing I forgot to mention is all this grayed out stuff that I was reading up here earlier. These are comments. So when you have a lot of JavaScript, it's a good idea to leave yourself and others comments if they're going to be working on it. And this just kind of is a guide, and it tells you what's going on in regular terms, and then it usually does the code for that. So keep that in mind. So now back down to the questions. What is the code output if the value of x is changed to 10? So normally x is 5. So if it was changed to 10 instead of 15, we would be getting, let's see, what would it say? It would say, I'm just going to copy this. The result is, but instead of 15, 20. Oh, copied too much. The result is 20, right? And that's because that x is going to switch to 10, and then x plus y would then be 10 plus 10. Gives us 20. Is JavaScript a compiled or interpreted language? It is interpreted. We talked about that earlier. So mark those, and once you've done that, you're done with task number 3. Now it's on to task number 4, integrating JavaScript. So basically, we're going to talk about different ways to actually get JavaScript into your website. And the instructions for websites are HTML. That's what HTML does. It's like the instructions for a website, and then the CSS is going to be what like stylizes the website. It makes it look good. So how do we get JavaScript in there so it can interact with these things and make our website better? And there's kind of two ways to do that. You can have an internal JavaScript, and then you can have an external JavaScript. So we'll talk about an internal JavaScript first. Basically, all that is you're going to put the JavaScript directly into the HTML. And you're going to have to put it specifically in between two script tags. So you'll have your opening script tag, all of your JavaScript that you want on the HTML page, and then your closing script tag. So the script tags could be placed inside the head section, and that's usually for JavaScripts that have to be loaded for the page to actually render, or before the page is rendered. Or you can put it inside the body section of your HTML. And if you don't know what either of those are, then you probably need to check out the How Websites Work in the Web Application Basics so you can learn a bit more about HTML. But yeah, so you're just gonna have script, all of your JavaScript, and then a closing script tag. And tags are just like an integral part of HTML. It's how HTML works. So hopefully you've heard of it before. If not, go check out those other walkthroughs. And so here's our example. So what they're going to have us do is we're going to open internal.html, or does it have us create a document? We're going to create an empty file named internal.html. So we'll go to create document, empty file, and we're going to name this internal.html. So now we have that. What's it want us to do? Once the editor is open, paste in the following code. So we're just going to copy all that code and paste that right into our internal.html. And then we're going to save it. We can actually exit out of that. And if we take a look at this code real quick, we can see that we have our script tag. Then we have all of our HTML, or not our HTML, sorry, all of our JavaScript, right? And it's going to be the same script that we already wrote, this 5 plus 10 equals 15, and then it's going to print us out the result. And then we have our closing script tag, okay? So this is internal JavaScript, right? Which is the whole thing we've been talking about. So it's right inside just the normal HTML. So now, let's see, what does it want us to do? Double click and open it in the browser. So we're gonna open this in Google. Addition of two numbers, the result is 15. So we can see that listed here. Now, if I go to view page source, there's something important here that they make note of right down here. And basically, again, I'm not totally sure why they include this. It seems a bit out of the scope of this room, but here we have this document .getElementById result, and then it says inner HTML equals the result is blah, 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 blah. And before, when we first made this script, it just said console.log, and then it gave us everything it wanted to print. So it's a bit more complex here, but basically what it's doing is, see how this has ID result? So all this does, and I'm not going to break this down like word by word, I'll just give you a quick overview. But basically what this does is it says, hey, wherever this ID result is, which is right here inside this paragraph tag, we want you to put the result is, and then add the actual result that we get from the JavaScript. So this gets put right up here because of all of that. And then that way it shows up on the actual page. So that's how that works. A bit out of the scope of this room, but read through all this. Hopefully that helps explain it a bit better, but that's all it's really doing. So don't worry too much about it. Now that we've done an internal JavaScript, it's on to external JavaScript. And basically what external JavaScript does is, instead of having the JavaScript just like all right here, instead we just do these script tags that open and close, and we just tell it, hey, go get this JavaScript from this other place and put it right here, right? So pretty straightforward. This src equals, that stands for source. So we're telling it where to go get, or the name of this JavaScript, and then it's going to go get it, and it's going to put it right in here. So this is just a link to the external JavaScript file. So now we're going to do exactly what we just did, but this time we're going to create an empty file and name it external.html. And then we'll open it up. And this time we're going to take this, paste it in there. So now we have this script.js, but I skipped a step, right? So now we have our actual JavaScript. So let's just save that. But now we need something called script.js for it to actually use. We need the JavaScript portion. So I can close that, create an empty file, and I'll just name this script.js. And when I say I'll just name this script.js, it has to be named script.js, because that's what we named it in the external HTML. So it's going to be looking for something with this name. So now if I open it up, make sure I named it right, script.js. Yep. And then this is what we're going to paste inside that script.js file. So now let's save that, exit out. And now I assume it's going to want us to open this. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to open this external.html. So now we have this. So here's the external HTML and here's the internal HTML. They look exactly the same. So let's view page source on both of these. And then we'll be able to really see the difference here. So here, it just tells us, hey, go to this script.js. It doesn't have the actual JavaScript inside this HTML page. Whereas with the internal, we can see all of the JavaScript right there. Okay, so that's the difference. Internal, external, that's how you get JavaScript into a website using one of those two things. And it's super useful because then it's really easy to reuse JavaScript, and it helps keep your HTML looking good because instead of having a bunch of JavaScript right in the middle of it, you just have a single line that then takes you out to the external JavaScript. So for the most part, stick to external JavaScripts unless for a very specific reason you need an internal JavaScript. Now verifying internal or external JS. So what they want us to do is we're going to open the external test.html. So let's do that. I'm going to actually exit out of this because I got a bunch of tabs open. And if you go to exercise, we have this external test.html. So can you verify the JavaScript? So basically all they want us to do here is they want us to determine, hey, is this JavaScript internal? Is it external? And so we can go to, you can go into inspect or view page source. And then we can see the JavaScript here. It's external JavaScript, and it is going to this THM external.js. So you're going to want that. So you can copy that. And then for practice, go to a website. It could be TryHackMe, it could be Google, whatever. And then right click on it, go to view page source, and look at some of the scripts that they have. They will have scripts. Most of them will probably be external, and they'll have these nice long names that really tell you what they are and what they do. So go through that, practice on a website, and once you've done that, we can jump down to the questions. So which type of JavaScript integration places code directly within the HTML JavaScript? That would be internal. And then which method is better for reusing JavaScript across multiple websites? That would be external, because then you have the file separate and you can just use it wherever you want. And then what is the name of the external JavaScript file that is being called by external test.html? So that's what we did right here. So it's this THM external.js. So type that in or paste it. And then what attribute links an external JS file in the script tag? So an attribute is a HTML thing that you'll learn about as you learn more about HTML, and that is source. So it's telling us, SRC, which stands for source, and that tells us where to go and get that JavaScript. It just links it. So once you've answered all those, you can come up here, mark complete, and you've finished task number 4. Now it's on to task number 5, abusing dialog function. So now we're going to learn about different dialog functions. You have alert, prompt, and confirm. And we're going to learn about each one of those. So the alert is just going to have a box pop up, and that box is going to display something, and then it's going to have an OK button to get out. And so that's all the alert does. And you can read how they have that work right here. So they just have this alert, hello, THM, and that's how you make an alert in JavaScript. And then what happens on the actual website is this. You get a little pop-up. That's the whole pop-up is the alert. And then it says, hello, THM, because that's what they put inside here. And then you have an OK box to get rid of it. And if you look down here, you can see there in the console, and they have that. So we can actually try this. So if we just exit out, we'll open up a new tab. jump into the console, hit alert, and we can see we get the exact same thing. So you can hit OK, and that goes away. So that's what an alert box does. It just gives you a little alert. Now we have the prompt. And so what prompt does is it's going to do a very similar thing, but it's actually going to ask the user for input. Okay, so if we copy this, go back to our console and do the exact same thing. So we have this name equals, let me actually make that bigger for you. So we have this name equals prompt, and what is your name? Alert, hello, plus name. Okay, so if we run this, what happens? First, we get the prompt. What is your name? And then we can put Bob. So if we hit OK, then afterwards we get an alert. That's the next line. And it says, hello, Bob. Okay, so that's a prompt and an alert and a little JavaScript snippet that they have right there. So you can mess with that. So that's what a prompt does. It's going to actually ask for something. And then you also have confirm. And all that does is it's going to do the same thing. It's going to give you a little dialog box thing, and it's going to have something inside of it usually. And then you can hit OK, or you can hit cancel. And this is kind of what you'll see. You'll see all of those things. More often than not, input is going to be like in a form, and you don't always see input like this, but you do see a lot of this confirm. And so you'll hit OK or cancel, but it does the exact same thing. So on your own, take one of these, copy it, paste the JavaScript into your console, and see what happens. And so, yeah, those are the three dialog functions in JavaScript, and you can interact with those right in your browser. So now, how do hackers exploit this functionality? There's lots of ways that they can. They're going to talk about one, but basically they have a script here that is going to make an alert pop up 3 times in a row. So that's all it does. So let's go to, it wants us to create a file, or wait, I think it already has a file. Okay, yeah, so it already has the file for you. They technically ask you to create it, so I'll just follow their instructions, because why not? So it wants us to create a file named invoice.html. So I'm gonna create document, empty, invoice.html. Then I'm sure we're gonna open that, and it wants me to paste in this HTML, and inside of that HTML is our script right here, right? So there's our little for loop, and so I'm gonna save that. And then if we open this up in Google, we kind of already saw this page says hacked. So we hit OK, it pops up again. We hit OK, it pops up again, right? So now if we view page source, why did it do that? Well, it had 3 pop-ups because we have this for loop that goes over 3 times, and each time it goes over, it gives us that alert. Okay, so that's what this does. But now imagine you get this in your email, you open up this website, and instead of 3 times, it's set to 10,000 times or 500 times or whatever, or some big number. Essentially what it would do is it would make the browser unusable, right? So that's not like a serious hack or anything, but it's just an example of kind of how you can think outside the box and exploit some of the functionality built into JavaScript. So yeah, there's a lot of other things you can do. Cross-site scripting is a very popular thing. So, but you'll learn more about that as you keep going through TryHackMe. So make sure you've read through everything, and then we'll jump down to the questions. In the file invoice, how many times does the code show the alert hacked? That would be 3. I thought it was 3. Am I crazy? Yeah, that says 3. 2. 4, 3. What number is this? In the invoice. Oh, this is the invoice file we created. They want us to look at this exercise, hello.html. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's 5. But we can view page source and we can see exactly how many times it does it. It's this hello script. Oh man, they obfuscated it. We're not going to learn about obfuscation yet. But the answer to that is 5 because it's a different invoice.html. That's kind of confusing. So they're having us create these files that have the same name as the exercises. So keep that in mind. These are the exercises. Which of the JavaScript interactive elements should be used to display a dialog box that asks for user input? That would be prompt. What we learned about up there. So prompt. My bad. And then if the user enters Tesla, what value is stored in the car named prompt? What is your car name? In the car name variable should just be Tesla, right? If that's what we enter, then that's what the JavaScript is probably gonna use. So mark all those. Once you've done that, you can mark complete because you've finished task 5. Now it's on to task 6, bypassing flow statements. So we already talked about some of these flow statements, like these loops, right? We've learned about those, but there's also other statements like if-else statements and switch statements. And all this does is it controls like the logical flow of a script. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. You'll learn more about it as you keep doing scripting and you'll kind of get a feel for it. But here's a good example of logical flow, right? So we have this age variable. If the age is over 18, then we're going to say, hey, you are an adult. If you're not over 18, then we're going to say, hey, you're a minor, right? And so that's just one step and like the logical flow of a JavaScript, right? And normally there's lots of JavaScripts that are thousands of lines long, and there's tons of these different flow statements that can kind of, guide you through the JavaScript basically. And that's how it works. And depending on what conditions are met, you will go through the JavaScript differently, right? In one case, you'll get you're an adult, whereas in the other case, you're going to get you're a minor. So that's kind of what, flow they're talking about here. So read through all that. If-else statements, again, this is probably the most common one of these common conditional statements that you'll see. So we're going to create a file named age.html. So let's do that. Create document, empty file, age.html. Then I'm sure we're going to open it and paste all of this good stuff in there. So we're going to copy this. This is an HTML page, and inside of it we have an internal script, right? So if you look, that's all internal. So now we're going to come over here. We're going to save that, exit out. And if we open it up, what's going to happen? We get a prompt. What is your age? And if we do 21, we get you're an adult. Now what happens if I refresh this page and I put 7? You're a minor, right? And then we can view page source, and there's our HTML and JavaScript that we just put in. And because of that, now the page is interactive, right? So again, that's kind of the whole point of this JavaScript stuff, is to make the page interactive. So we kind of already saw that happen. So yeah, read through that example, make sure you understand it, and then bypassing login forms. So there's this login.html inside of the exercises. So let's open those and go to this login.html, and it's going to ask us enter your username. So if we read more about it, So in this example, a developer has made an authentication functionality, or he's put authentication functionality inside this JavaScript where the JavaScript asks for a username and a password. The username is admin and the password needs to match whatever password, is the correct password for you to actually log in. So that's what they're trying to do here. So we're going to click on that and it wants us to enter the name. So we know that the name is admin. So let's put in admin. Now it doesn't tell us the password. So I'm just going to put password. See what happens. Okay, so we get this authentication failed, incorrect username or password. So now if I view the page source, because I want to understand how that worked, where is that JavaScript that just had me do all that stuff? And they have an internal JavaScript right here. And if you read through it, it says prompt, enter your username, and then whatever you put, that's the username, and then prompt, enter your password. Whatever password you put there, that's going to be the password variable. And then if the username equals admin and the password equals complex password, okay, then it's going to say you're successfully authenticated. So they have the credentials inside of the JavaScript. That's bad. That's not something you're supposed to do, but people do it. And so we can see the credentials right there when we look at the JavaScript. So now if we reload this page, our username is going to be admin. And then our password is going to be complex password. And if we do that, we can see we are successfully authenticated, right? So this is just one way that you can bypass a login form, right? Depending on how the login form is built, that's a very, very poorly built login form, and you're not going to run into too many web developers that would ever do anything like that. But it's a good simplified example because there are lots of other ways to bypass login forms, but that's just one of them. So make sure you've gone through that example and you understand it, and then we'll jump down to the questions. What is the message displayed if you enter an age less than 18? I'm just going to jump up to our JavaScript. If we're less than 18, it's going to say you are a minor. And then what is the password for the user admin? That was complex password with a capital C and a capital P. So with that, once you've marked everything, you've finished task number 6. Now it's on to task number 7, exploring minified files. So minified, what does that mean? Basically in JavaScript, let me see if they have an example just to explain it. No, not really. Not a good one anyways. Okay, so then we'll just do what they say. So basically what minified or minification is it compresses a JavaScript file by getting rid of all unnecessary stuff. It gets rid of all the spaces, the line breaks, any comments, and it shortens variable names. It does all this stuff to make it super compact and faster, right? And so an example of that would be, do they have a minified? No, these are all obfuscated. Okay. But yeah, and what that essentially does is it makes it not readable, right? If you minify a JavaScript, then a person's not going to be able to look at it and know what's going on. They have to undo that action first. And then that's the same thing with obfuscation. So what obfuscation does is it purposefully makes JS harder, or JavaScript harder to read, right? It's going to rename all the variables. It's going to add code that it doesn't even need to use. It's going to change all the function names. It's going to do all sorts of stuff. So that's what obfuscation is. Obfuscation is like you're intentionally trying to make the JavaScript not readable by humans and very difficult to understand. Whereas minifying a JavaScript, it kind of has that same effect, not totally,
It does make it not exactly readable by a person, but minified, specifically, you're trying to make the JavaScript more lean. You're trying to make it compressed so that it'll do everything faster and better, right? So that's kind of the two differences, but they kind of end up doing a similar like thing. And we're going to look at some practical examples. So they want us to create a file on our desktop named hello.html. Is that what it said? Yeah, hello.html. So we're going to do that, create document, empty file, hello.html. And then I'm sure they're going to have us open it up. And we're going to want to put this HTML in there. So paste that in there, file, save. And we have this hello.js script that it's referencing. So I assume they're going to want us to make that. Yep. So now we got to create this hello.js script. So we'll name that hello.js like they ask. And because that's what's referenced inside the source, so it has to have that name, we'll paste that in, file, save. Okay. And now double click on the hello.html. We do that, we get welcome to THM. Okay, great. So now let's view page source. We have this script. Let's open up that script in another tab, and it gives us this function, hi, welcome to THM, right? And that's really readable. We can look at this and we understand what it's gonna do for us, right? Let me exit out of these. So that's super easy to look at. Now what it's gonna have us do, we already looked at that. We can see the hello.js. And then obfuscation in action, we're going to use this JavaScript obfuscator. So if you go down here, where is it? Open up that website. It'll give you a JavaScript deobfuscator, but then you can go to the obfuscator.io as well. So if we do that, and if we take this, function alert, hi, welcome. Now what we're gonna do here is we want to obfuscate it, okay? Well, actually here it's going to minify and obfuscate the JS code using this online tool. Oh wait, here, there we go. Open that online tool. Yeah, there we go. So now if we type this in, yeah, forget this one. This one's not as nice. Use this website. Okay, so what they're having us do, geez, I'm moving around too fast for you guys probably. So we created this hello.js and we created this hello.html. All it does is it says, hey, welcome to THM. So now we're gonna open this website and we're gonna plug in our JavaScript, and when we minify and obfuscate it, we're gonna get all this garbage, right? And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy all that to my clipboard because that's what they want us to do. And there it is there. So if we copy it, we're gonna remove the current contents of hello.js. So let's go back here. We're gonna go back to hello.js. I'm gonna open with Pluma so I can edit it. And we are gonna take this whole thing, get rid of it, and paste in. Oh, come on, is it not working? Oops. I think I pasted it in twice. Come on, dude. Copy. Why is this so hard right now? Okay, there we go. So there's our hello.js now. It's all this really not readable stuff. So I'm gonna save that, exit out. Now if I open up my hello.html, maybe I did paste it in twice, but let's look. Let's view page source. We'll open up this hello.js. Yeah, that may have got put in twice, but whatever. But it essentially does the same thing, right? When we run this website with this hello.js, and this is the JavaScript, it did the exact same thing as this JavaScript. And the whole point in them having you do that is they just want to reiterate that when you obfuscate and minify, or if you do one or the other, or if you do both, the JavaScript is still going to function totally normal. Okay. But instead, it's going to be a little bit quicker and people won't be able to read it super well. So go through that example. You'll be able to see it here. Yeah, they're just reiterating again. The code is now obfuscated, but the function remains exactly the same. So now they want us to de-obfuscate code. So the way that we can do that is with this website. And then I can take all of this, we'll copy it, paste it in there. And if I de-obfuscate it, we get the exact same thing, right? So when I talk about minification and de-obfuscation and you get this, it might seem like, okay, yeah, so now you have this, but this can all be undone. But it's still best practice to do that, just because it makes it harder for hackers to, basically, it's one more thing that a hacker has to do that they have to put effort in. And so it might prevent them from actually, hacking a website. Now, the truth is that by itself isn't really going to do that. But again, it's one more barrier. They have to go through the effort of reverse engineering this JavaScript or de-obfuscating it or deminifying it. So yeah, read through everything and then we'll jump down to the questions. What is the alert message shown after running the hello.html? If we look up here, welcome to THM. And then what is the value of the age variable in the following obfuscated code snippet? So that's obfuscated. So I'm going to copy that. And we're going to paste it in here because this is the de-obfuscator. We're going to run that and its age equals 21. So let's put that in as our answer, 21. Sweet. And with that, we have finished task number 7. Minified files. Really, it's minified files and obfuscation. Now it's on to task 8, best practices. So basically, don't only rely on client-side validation. So that login form that we looked at where it gave us the username and password when we looked at the JavaScript, basically it's saying don't just rely on the client side, because people that are really good at hacking or know a lot about websites and JavaScript, we can actually manipulate what's going on the client side. So you need to also validate server side. So best practice is to validate client and server side. So keep that in mind, and then refrain from adding untrusted libraries. So you can include any sort of JavaScript you want just by using that source inside the script tag. But when you do that, you got to know, is that JavaScript trusted? Is it a good JavaScript or is it vulnerable, right? So making sure that any JavaScript files that you do use are secure, that's important, because a lot of times people don't write all of their own JavaScript for a website. They borrow it, right? Or they share it, or it's open source. And so they use JavaScript from multiple places. And if there's something wrong in that JavaScript and you decide to use it on your website, now that problem is inside your website. So make sure you use trusted libraries, and then of course, avoid hard-coded secrets. Just like, for example, an API key, an access token, or credentials, again, like what we saw in the login form, you shouldn't have any of that on the client side where they can read it, because someone who's knows a bit about computers will be able to find it. So keep all that stuff out of the client side and don't hard code it anywhere. and then minified and obfuscate your JavaScript code. I kind of already talked about this. It's best practice to do this because, again, it makes it harder for attackers to understand the logic of the code, and it's going to reduce the JavaScript size, which is just going to help your website work better. So keep that in mind. Then down to the question, is it a good practice to blindly include JS in your code from any source? No, it is not. So put nay, and then you finish task number 8. Now it's on to task number 9, the conclusion. Basically, just going to be a quick overview. Make sure you've read everything, and then mark complete. And once you've done that, you have finished task number 9. And with that, you have finished the JavaScript Essentials room from TryHackMe.